Hello all. So today we are going to learn about a very important topic of service architecture which is used for microservice architecture. So while designing we come across many things as a part of architecture and design. So today we are going to discuss about a strangling design pattern or the strangling architecture where we are going to see that how a monolithic application can be migrated from its monolithic architecture to microservice architecture. So it's an interim kind of architecture which really helps to build microservice or to think that how a monolithic applications can be migrated to a microservice architecture. So let's start. So this principle or this design pattern says that, if we have a monolithic application, as you can see here in the diagram, that, we have a monolithic application and we want to migrate it to a microservice architecture. So immediately, let's say if we want to migrate that whole application to microservice, so that would be a difficult task. So with this design pattern, how can we do that? So this pattern says that firstly we have to divide our microservice into a smaller microservice. So let's say in first phase, let's say we have one whole microservice. You can see my cursor here. You can see that this is the monolithic chunk that's there, and this is a microservice chunk that's there. So we have divided our microservice monolithic, which is the bigger chunk, and now we have divided into two services which are having, let's say, new features coming in the service itself and some of the capabilities from the monolithic microservice architecture. So now here, if we go to the second phase of development, so now we are going to split that into three services. So here you can see that the monolithic chunk of service will become small, and we are going to eliminate some of the code from monolithic to these services which are independent services. So uh, it can be there in one of the service, or it can be splitted into many other services. So the idea here is we have to logically divide those services, like the services which are there as a part of monolith application. Now we have divided into different services. So now in the next step, over the time, this is the time window that we are having. So now over the time, if we go along and see, now the monolithic chunk is going a bit low here. The microservice chunk, that the services that we have indulged or built, are pretty much increasing day by day. So later on, when we have grown with that, you can see in the diagram that, that in this the services are huge, and we have divided those monolith application into, let's say, 10 services. So now it's and each of these service is going to follow the microservice architecture, which says that, it's going to have a single responsibility and the shared responsibility. As you see that new features are coming in the green ones, and the yellow ones are the existing code base that's migrated from the monolith application to these smaller chunk services that we have. So now what was the problem? So we were dealing with the problem that we have a monolith application, and how we can migrate that monolith application to a microservice architecture. So here, if we go and see that this pattern of dividing the monolith application to a microservice, a smaller chunk of the microservice. So you can see this pattern is called straggling design pattern, which is heavily used in modern days because currently we are having so many applications which are built in monolith, which was a legacy application, and now we have migrated those applications to microservice environment. So here you can see, okay, now when we have gone with this architecture where we have so many services which are going to be the part of this, and this is the huge capability. Let's say this is automobile service, or this is giant service which do the order payment and all. So let's take an example. So here, if we see that team A is going to use the order service here, and with the monolith application that's here, so team B, C, and D is dependent on all these three big chunk of microservices which are interdependent of each other, and this is the huge microservice that's there. So let's say that if there are some refactoring or there is a production deployment for order service, so team A is only affected and they know that this service is going to be affected. But here, let's say there is a downtime for team C and they are working on title service or pricing service. So it's a downtime for all the teams. So which says that team B and team D are going to be affected with the changes which are going to be deployed for team C. And now you can see in the timeline here that with the CI/CD pipeline, this is also blocked because of team C. So now you can see that, with microservice architecture, it gives us some flexibility, where we have different services and which are independent of their deployment and CI/CD pipeline. So their pipelines are going to be independent, and we are going to deploy those services in different environments, so that they are not dependent to each other. So this is how we can achieve that straggling design pattern. So now next thing would be, now we have solved this problem. Now next thing would be to go on and see that what all things that comes as an advantage of of a straggling design pattern. So what comes along the way, what things that we see as a part of advantage from straggling design pattern, and what could be the disadvantages from that. Okay, so let us see. So here, if we see that if we do a incremental migration of the service, so let's say if we are going to do the incremental migration from uh, from the existing monolith or the legacy application, so we can do it through incremental migration, and along the way we got the advantage that we see that what all chunks we can move and divide it into different microservices. Next thing is the flexibility. So flexibility is a part of, if there are some dependent packages, so other teams can work on those independent and flexible components or microservices which we have carved out from the monolith application. Next thing is the coexistence. So whether it's a microservice or a monolith, so uh, unless and until we have the whole migration ready for the monolith, then the coexistence of both microservice as well as the monolith application will coexist. So these are some of the advantages. So if we can have, let's say, a fallback mechanism, so we can have the fallback mechanism here in that. Now there are some drawbacks which I have highlighted here. So there can be some drawbacks which are pretty much used to consider whether we want to go with this pattern or not, because one short development or dividing that into different microservice would be difficult. So here, if we consider closely what are the drawbacks of straggling design pattern, so let's see. So there can be existing some complexity. So there can be some interdependent things which we cannot migrate just directly to the services, or how we can divide that into different microservices. This could be a bigger challenge. Next thing is the data consistency. So we are going to have, let's say, two of the services which coexist, and which can share the load between those requests which are coming. So there can be some data consistency issues which can come. Now, along with that, firstly, there can be like dependent services, independent services which are there. So now, if the environment coexists, so we have to live with all those things, the services which we have just brought up as a microservice, and the services which are there as a part of monolith application. So we there will be increased network calls. So in this we can say that with the existence of both the services, there will be a shared load that's going to be there. Next thing is the independent management. So earlier we were doing or managing the monolithic component as a whole, but here now we need to have a proper strategy for microservice architecture, because here the microservice are going to communicate with each other. They need to do the load balancing, and data inconsistency can be an issue. So how we are going to do that? So those parameters we have to keep in mind while designing the microservices which are carved out from the monolith. Now, to understand this whole phenomena as a as a memory, so from that, let's say we have this analogy where which it says that, if we have a existing house, okay, and we want to migrate it that to, or renovate that house to the new one or full furnished one, or we need to do some changes in that. So how can we do that? So it's similar to that analogy if we want to go. So let's say, firstly we will divide the, let's say we have a existing house as a part of the whole renovation that we need to do. Now, how to do that into individual components? So this is a problem. Now to solve that, gradually, firstly what we will do, we will introduce a modular room. So we will go room by room, or any of the approach that we think, let's say let's paint the doors and hallways, or the common things which are there, and then we can go to the main rooms. So these can be some of the things which we can think of. So this is the analogy that we can think as a part of a strangler design pattern. So let's say we have an existing house and we want to introduce modular rooms. So here, room by room, we are going to renovate the things as a part of similar to microservice architecture that we have. So we go room by room and renovate one room, and then after shifting the things from one room to another room, and then once the renovation is done for the room, and then we are going to migrate or live in the renovated room which is just newly renovated, and move the things from the old room to the new room. And this is how gradually we are going to cover all the rooms. Once rooms are done, then we are going to move to doors. So let's say there is some paint work that needs to be done on doors and floorways and whatnot. So all those things we'll do after that. So these are some of the integration points which needs to be done, let's say within a day or within 2 days. but these are some of the key things which needs to be renovated. Now, occupants comfort. So let's say there are some guest which comes to your house, and there are some common areas. So we need to do some little bit of adjustment while the user experience doesn't go down. So there can be the shared things that can coexist at the time of start, but later on, let's say once we move from there, then we can have the better user experience. Now, after completion phase, so it's the whole thing that's going to come. So now everything is tested. Now each and every area in the house that we have seen is pretty much built. Now we can see that the whole house, which is firstly the inner and then the outer, the exterior, the walls, that are there, so those are painted and renovated. So all those things can be done as a part of gradual incremental adjustment. So here the guys who are in the room are going to be affected, shifting from one place to another. They are going to have a bit of adjustment that needs to be done. So that a bit of adjustment and dividing that into different services is similar to the strangling design pattern. So what all things, key areas which we can think of as a part of strangling design pattern, we need to see that gradually how can we move the bigger chunk to the smaller chunks and divide that based on the microservice architecture. So here I have completed uh, the bigger things are the actual implementation of this straggling design pattern. So it's just a thought for the day. So I think that this will give you enough information from the perspective that if we are designing the things from scratch, so you can consider that straggling design pattern. If there are some notes or videos available over internet, so you can go through it, and there are some strategies that you can think of and better prepared for those edge cases, scenarios, and configuration which comes along the way. So hope this video will help you to understand the straggling design pattern a bit more in detail. Thanks for watching the video.